Step 1, to make sure that we can get PHP Code Sniffer and the WordPress coding standards working for our projects, is to make sure that we've got PHP installed and accessible. So if you just want to check whether or not you've got PHP installed and accessible, you can open a terminal in Visual Studio Code that's using Control tilde. You can open a terminal and you can just type PHP-version. If you get some kind of information like this that shows the PHP version number, then that means PHP is already set up and you're ready to install Composer. But if you don't get any of this kind of information, it means that you're going to have to either navigate to the local by Flywheel directory, which has PHP accessible, or you're going to have to install it globally. If you're on a Windows computer, you should probably think about installing it globally. I want to install the rest of these things globally so that we can use them from any project anywhere without having to install the things over and over again. So I think that it's probably a good idea to install it globally. I'm going to provide some links to talk about how to install PHP globally on Windows systems. So if you need some help to do that, go ahead and check those links. But after installing PHP and checking that you get a version number like this, then we're ready to move on to installing Composer. So for Composer, what we can do is we go over to the Composer homepage, getcomposer.org, and we can click here to the Getting Started page. The reason I want to show you this Getting Started page is so that I can kind of show you a little bit more about what Composer is and how it gets installed on Windows and on Mac. So it says right here, Composer is a tool dependency management for PHP. It allows you to declare the libraries your project depends on, and it will manage, install, and update them for you. It's a little bit similar to Node's NPM or Ruby's bundler. Most of the time you install it on a project by project basis, installing them within a directory. It'll install things within your vendor directory inside of a project. By default, it doesn't install anything globally, so it's not really, so it is a dependency manager. And one more time. By default, it does not install anything globally, but for our convenience, there is a global command that we can use to install it globally, and I want to install it globally so that we can at least get the WordPress coding standards up and running globally. So if you scroll down a little bit, you can see how to install it on Linux or Mac. There is a download file right here, which will download a composer.phr file to the current directory. You can also click up here to download, and it shows you a couple of more commands for how to download this installer. You can download the installer. It verifies the SHA number to make sure it's a good installation. It runs the installer and then it removes the installer. You can do that on Mac. But the main idea is that eventually you will get a composer.phr executable, which will let you run Composer. And we want to make that globally accessible. So down here in the globally section, you can see that all we need to do is move that composer.phr variable or executable. We move the composer.phr executable to a place on our computer where we can readily access it. We need to make sure that we put it inside of a directory that is already in our path, or we just modify our path so that we can access it globally. But this is a really good command that we should be able to use to just move it easily to a location that's already accessible on our path, and then we can install it. We can use it globally. For Windows, it's a little simpler. All you have to do really is download and run this Composer setup. So that will install the latest Composer version and set your path so that you can call Composer from any directory in your command line. So I'll let you go ahead and download and install Composer. In order to verify that Composer is working, what we can type in our terminal is Composer about. After you've installed everything, Composer, the command, should be accessible. If you type Composer about, it should give you some information about your installation of Composer. And once that's ready, we're ready to move on to step 3. Step 3 is PHP Code Sniffer. So if we go over to PHP Code Sniffer in GitHub, we can see that we can install Code Sniffer globally, and I think that this is a really good idea so that we can use it in any of our projects anytime we want. So we can just copy this command and take it over to our terminal, paste it into our terminal, and let it run. And so that should download and install PHP Code Sniffer globally. I've already installed it, so you can see here it says nothing to install or update. But the next thing that we really want to do is we want to enable the PHP Code Sniffer command, which is PHPCS. We want to enable that globally as well. So we want to make sure that this is stored in our path or somewhere accessible from our path so that we can use it like that. If we don't do that, then what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to type in the full path to wherever we installed it from. This is what I was doing previously. So in order to run it, what I was doing is I was needing to type in the entire path to the variable. So instead of that, why don't we add it to our path? So I'll link to a tutorial that will teach you how to add variables to your path in Windows. But for Mac, you're probably using Bash as your client in the terminal. Or for me, I'm using Z Shell because I'm on Mac Catalina. So I can open my .z shell rc file. And then I just add this command here to add it to my path. It'll be basically the same command if you're using Bash as well. So you would just change this Z shell to Bash, and then you would be able to add it to your path in that way. So as long as we make sure that we've added PHP Code Sniffer to our path, then what we can do is we can check out the version number of this one as well. So we can type PHP Code Sniffer -- version. And it should pop up the version number of PHP Code Sniffer we've got. We can also check what kinds of configuration PHP Code Sniffer has right now. We can type PHPCS-I. This gives us some information about the standards we've got set up. So currently, the installed coding standards are PEAR, Zend, PSR2, MySource, Squiz, PSR1, and PSR12. So the next step would be to add the WordPress coding standards. So for the WordPress coding standards, we can come over here to the project on GitHub, and just like Composer can be installed locally within certain directories, we can also install the WordPress coding standards within our projects individually. We could create a new project that uses the WordPress coding standards. With this command, this will create a new Composer project with the WordPress coding standards. Or we can install WordPress coding standards as a dependency inside a pre-existing project. Like if we're making a child theme or if we're updating something, then we're going to have to use a couple of plugins. We're going to have to require these plugins in order to handle the external standards. But what I want to do is I want to make it available basically everywhere. I want to use a standalone version of the WordPress coding standards and put it somewhere where I can just access it whenever I want, basically. So what we can do is we can copy this command, git clone branch master, and we can install this to our root directory. So let's go ahead and copy that command, go over to Visual Studio Code, and then I will change directories to my root directory. Actually, let me change my directory to my local sites directory. So then I'm within my local by flywheel directory. So I'll change to local sites. Actually, I think what I want to do is I want to install this with Composer. So let me install this with Composer. Let's navigate to our users directory .composer vendor bin vendor